Welcome to the Fight Monsters podcast. Today we're talking to real people fighting real monsters.
Fight monsters, fight monsters. You're listening to the Fight Monsters podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fight Monster Show. I'm Steven Norberg, and today we have a very special guest, someone I'm very privileged to consider a friend, and someone who is definitely a monster slayer and fighter in her own right, and someone of whom I would say Fight Monsters would not exist without. So, Eve Hogan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Steven.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this conversation, and the way I want to start off is just asking you about a monster that you've been fighting in your life.
Yeah, so the first thing that came to mind when you approached me about this podcast was kind of the most obvious one, which is to talk about how we met, and that was a monstrous lawsuit, and I was your attorney, and still am so grateful to meet you, even though it wasn't the best of circumstances. But that was just one of um, very many lawsuits that I was engaged in for about a period of maybe 8 years. And they all had the same theme. And that theme was fighting huge corporations um, and against who were suing small business owners and individuals. And so we had these big bullies who were coming after people who were, just trying to pursue what they loved and were passionate about, and were trying to use the legal system, which is something that I've always loved. I'm an attorney. It's something I've wanted to do since I was in high school. It's something I really care very deeply about, and they were using it for really the wrong purposes, in my view, and it really was a real travesty of justice in a way that was really offensive to me fundamentally. And so I spent, as I said, maybe 8 years really fighting on behalf of, every small business owner that I could find that was being bullied by these corporate giants who were using the legal system to intimidate and put people out of business just because they could, because they were better resourced. And so that's how you and I met, is that you fell victim to one of these lawsuits, and through it, I think you and I both got stronger. But that was a big fight that I had for a long period of time, and that was the monster that I initially thought that I would talk about.
Yeah.
When I thought deeper about this podcast and what I wanted to talk about, I actually thought, you know, I should dig a little bit even further back. And if I'm honest, it's not just those corporate bullies that were the monsters to me. Those were, like, my fight against them were kind of the byproduct of something that happened much earlier. And that was, where I came from. And so I thought about, why was it so important to me? Why was it such a mission to fight bullies and to show that I could stand up to them, and to make sure that these vulnerable people who are victims of bullying were taken care of and protected? And the reason is that, my father was a huge bully. And,
Wow.
that's that's where this came from. I think I really grew up feeling like you know, a lot of things. One is that I came from, this person who was putting so much evil into the world that I felt like it was my responsibility as his flesh and blood to put as much good in to counter what he had done. And I think I also felt like, I need to prove that I can stand up to this, that it didn't affect me, that I'm fine. And so, there's a lot of things that went into this, drive that I had to try and fight all the bullies out there in the world. Um, and so that's, I think as far as an origin story, it didn't come from nowhere. That mission to, fight justice, to really have all those lawsuits and get involved in all of those crazy conflicts came from somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I've often thought that there's something powerful that happens when one of our greatest strengths can also be a weakness, where
Hmm.
something that we so passionately believe in then kind of consumes us, and then it
Yeah.
really takes on a whole new trajectory in our life. And I'm curious to hear more about that. Do you feel like part of this struggle was proving something to yourself, or is it more external, or just really wanting to prove something to the world, or to change something more externally?
I think it was all of those things. So I guess I'll just say yes. Um, I think that, I had to prove to myself that I could do this, that I was no longer a victim, that I could stand up to this bullying behavior, that I was an adult now, I was a grown up, that I had that strength. I think I had to prove to others, even though, one of the things I've learned is others don't are not judging me, that there's others are not judging you the same way that you think they are, or that you're
Mm,
judging yourself. So, but I wanted to prove that, all of these things that happened to me in my youth um, didn't break me. That I was okay, that I could still be successful, I could still be a lawyer and a law professor, and I could still do all those things and have a family and not be broken by those things. And I think too, and also like I said, I wanted to counter what was put out there, like almost a karmic thing. Like, I
oh,
somebody I came from put a lot of bad stuff into the world,
mm,
and I wanted to be the counterbalance to that.
right,
And I felt
right.
it was my responsibility, which is another thing I've come to learn is not.
Yeah, I think that's so hard to navigate. I remember
Yeah,
one conversation. I think it was in Boston. It's hard to say because you and I were in mediations and depositions in D.C.,
yeah,
Boston, and
all
L.A. So
over the
kind of
place.
all over.
Yeah, yeah,
But I remember like during a brief break, we were having this conversation about how to avoid getting numb inside because of how
yeah.
draining and exhausting it is to face oppression and to face something that just seems wrong and you want to fight against it. But how
Mhm.
do you keep yourself from starting to take on the damage? And I think for me, I thought if I was just optimistic enough and kept trying hard,
Yeah.
just try harder, it'll get
Yeah.
better.
Me
And
too.
yeah, it didn't work for me. So
No, me
I'm
neither.
yeah, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if you can share a little bit more about that, about some of
Yeah.
the effects that you noticed or things even now you're unraveling and understanding about how that shaped you and what you have to deal with now on this
Yeah.
side of it.
That's a great point. It's definitely something you and I both struggled with, and I think, I just kept feeling like if I save enough small businesses and save enough people, I'll feel better or I'll vanquish this monster. And I realized at some point it was bottomless. There will always be bullies. There will always be these sharks, in the tank.
Mm,
There will always be people who don't act ethically and who want to take advantage of others. And I think what was, and you and I both experienced this with, certain of the attorneys on the other side. They were just not great people. I'm going to be honest,
mm,
and like I'm not going to name names, but
yeah.
spending day in and day out, uh, just being the butt of kind of the barrage of their abuse and um, sexism and just all sorts of wrongdoing really was depressing, and it was hard, and it was stressful, and it was miserable. And at some point I kind of looked at it and I thought, what I really love and what really makes me feel good inside is the time I spend with my clients. So, the time I spent getting to know you, for example, the
Mm,
time I spent getting to know, like, I have all of these clients who are just wonderful, wonderful people who became friends, and they are all doing things motivated by love and passion and art and, and creativity, and not by finances or wanting to make the most money or wanting to beat people down. And the more I spent with the good people, the more fulfilled and happy I felt. And the more I spent with the sharks, the more depressed I felt.
mm,
And
yeah.
so it was kind of this realization that, I don't really have to spend time swimming with the sharks. I can just get out of the ocean, and they're not there. And I can spend my time, trying to support the good people. And that's going to do just as much because, like I said, unfortunately, the bullies are not, they're bottomless. They're going to be there all the time, always. And I don't have to swim in their ocean. I can kind of get out of it and spend my time with positive things, and spending my time supporting the people I do care about who are good people. And that's kind of the shift I made. So I stopped I stopped doing this fight against the litigation bullies, and I started instead doing work just to support people I believed in, and not in a litigation setting, not in a anti-bullying setting. I just switched jobs and started being counseling clients who are doing good things, and that has made me 1,000 times happier.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that's true for, like, there are people who are meant to litigate and who love that and who thrive on it, but I'm not one of them, and it was bringing me down, and so that is a change that I had to make.
Yeah, that's neat to hear. I remember maybe a precursor to that a year
Yeah.
and a half ago or so when we first started
Yep.
Fight Monsters. We were talking about how uh, there will be, kind of in the supply of monsters, and
Yeah.
monsters will always exist, and that's just part of the story and part of the struggle. And we really can spend our entire life being so focused on the monster or on getting
Yeah.
revenge or just trying to make the evil go away. Um, but at the end of the day, it's an impossible thing. Not that it's not a worthwhile
Right.
fight to have,
Right.
but instead, if we can focus on ourselves and on internally the growth that comes out of it, I think there's so much power that comes from that, so much beauty to offer to the world. And I've
Yeah.
always really liked this analogy of just, light and darkness, very, very simple. About if you have a very dark place and you want it to be light, you don't spend your entire time getting all the darkness out of the room. You can't,
Yeah.
shoo the darkness away. But a little bit of light is just simply more strong than the dark. And I think that really works when focusing on kind of life vision and on personal growth and just who we want to become on the other side of becoming stronger and better. Is focusing on the light is extraordinarily powerful.
I
But
love
we so
that.
often, yeah, just get caught up in the darkness and
Yeah.
it drags us all down.
I saw with my kids and my husband, we saw a movie the other week, and he was reminding me when I was talking about this podcast that it was really apt. It was actually this movie, actually called, I think it's called Love and Monsters.
Mm,
And it was one of the lessons of it was, there's all these monsters in the world. And so people were driven underground and they weren't living. They weren't, going above ground. They weren't, seeing each other. They were just suffering underground and hiding because there were monsters out in the world. And I, so spoiler alert, if, mute this if you haven't seen it if you want to. but but at the end, the really important lesson was, they just learned to come above ground and live with the monsters, and some you had to avoid and some you fought, but they weren't all going to kill you. And instead of hiding underground and not living the way you wanted to and having them get you down and cause you to fear, you walked outside anyway into the light and you lived your life and you just learned to live around them. And I really liked that.
yeah, yeah, I like that too. I had this interesting revelation, I think last week, about how for much of the last, well, my whole life really, but especially the last few years, I've been so focused on trying to be optimistic and trying to find the joy and the happiness in the midst of some real struggles and some heartache and some hard things. And it kind of dawned on me that without letting myself experience some of the sadness and process some of the anger, the joy that I felt was very shallow. And I don't know if this is proven or absolutely true, but to me it really resonates that the depths to which we're able to process our own pain and anger is similar to how much joy we can feel on the other side. And I think that I went kind of unhealthily numb and trying to be too optimistic and not asking friends for help or just not expressing that I had a hard day or I was frustrated or things felt really hard. And I think that's interesting how some of these things I've tried to avoid, I think often we just don't want to talk about, can actually help on the other side. The valleys can really define the peak that we'll experience. And I think
That's
that's kind
so
of a
true.
really neat principle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, that's something that. So as you know, I got married last August, and that's something that I think both of us really have as kind of a life theme is that we both went through really difficult lives and a lot of challenges and obstacles. And when we found each other kind of late in life, um, the joy that we were able to feel and the gratefulness that we have for each other every day in kind of our second lives now is made that much deeper because of the suffering that came before. And so, coming from those valleys, like you said, is what allows us to really feel and appreciate every day the highs, which come also. So I think you're right. It makes it
Yeah.
much richer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's just inspiring too. And thinking about the long road we've already had for starting Fight Monsters, um, I think I think it's hard to interact with people and encourage each other when we know that the reality of this world is we won't all get justice and things will feel really unfair and there will be really hard things that we have to deal with. But the truth is, there will always be these bright, shining moments, like we just talked about how adversity can shape us and allow us to become people that we would not otherwise become for the better. And that there
Absolutely.
are, ways that we can grow that we will become stronger and better than we wouldn't have. And I think that is, for me, a large part of the reason why we have these conversations, so why Fight Monsters exists. But just thinking about the growth and how beauty really can come out of adversity. Um, but I wanted to ask you something else because I know that sometimes it's really easy just to minimize hard things and minimize the true cost of the monsters that we face. And so I'm curious if there are any other ways that you've found that this has impacted you that you've learned about, or just how you've navigated some of the true cost of spending so much of your life devoted to this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It really impacted everything. It was hard to spend that much time kind of in the trenches of evil. So it was rewarding because a lot of times we were able to, help people who were at their lowest points to get out of it, or at least to see some hope or to rebuild. But living that much in constant knowledge and experience of the meanness that people can show to one another was hard. It was hard.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything that you wish you could go back and tell, like the younger, earlier you, about this kind of early on in the process? Any wisdom that you wish you could impart to help yourself navigate these things?
Yeah, I mean, so I think I would definitely say, do what you love, not what you feel like you have a responsibility to do or that you have to prove. Um, I remember actually uh, a mentor I had back in like 2004. So I was in my last year of law school and I was working at a law firm over the summer. And I had this mentor who was an attorney, and he took me under his wing. And I remember, the law practice had a litigation department and a transactional department. And the litigators were like the fighters, right? And the transactional department was more, helping people start businesses and, write contracts. And it was all kind of positive things. And I remember he was part of the transactional department, and he said to me, "You're one of us, come be with me." And I was like, "No, I want to fight. I want to be a litigator." And I insisted that I wanted to prove something. I wanted to like fight injustice. I wanted to be that. And he saw in me what I hadn't yet, because he's right. And that's where I ended up, 17 years later, is I came
Yeah.
full around and I said, "You know what? That actually wasn't me. I had to try it. I had to prove it." But what he saw was, I don't like to fight. I don't like, when people are mean to each other. I really just want to help people do good things.
Right.
And I think, I was a blockade to myself, because what was obvious to somebody who had just met me, I was fighting because I felt this responsibility and I felt like I had all of this stuff to prove. And if I had not wasted so much time trying to prove something to, nobody else cared. This was all in my head. If I hadn't wasted all that time trying to prove something, I probably would have, not gone through that. At the same time, I really like what you said about, what we go through makes us who we are and makes us stronger. I met amazing people through what I've done. There were people that I was able to help, and I think that every adversity gives us character and strength, and makes us grateful for what we do have on the other side. And so, would I trade it? Probably not. Like, I don't know that I would tell my younger self not to do that. I think it was maybe something I had to do and go through, but I do know now that I'm not that person. I'm not a fighter.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's hard to tease out sometimes what's happening internally inside of us and what's happening externally. And kind of by that, I mean, I know for a fact that you did a tremendous amount of good, and that I am very grateful to you for what you did in my life. But also, I've talked to many of your other clients, and I know that you were a superhero for many of us, and that can stand and be different from the fact of internally if there are some unhealthy and all these hard things going on, and it's not mutually exclusive. It's okay for
Yeah.
both to exist simultaneously, and I'm very much kind of a black and white person, so for me my brain explodes a little bit when I try to understand nuances or understand that there can be really good things in the midst of really bad things that happen
Yeah.
simultaneously.
And it wasn't all
But
miserable, like, and I
yeah,
want to clarify, like, it was hard overall to be in that world, but it also, like, there were these moments that were really beautiful and meaningful. And when I was fighting for you guys, like when we were at a deposition and I could defend you, or when we won things, or when we got like a good result or outcome, like those were amazing moments, and some of the best days in my life were, like, I remember getting an outcome for one client, and it was just like a phenomenal feeling. So it definitely wasn't all bad.
yeah, yeah, that's right. I know that you spent some time as a law professor, and that you've taught a lot of students, and I'm kind of curious to hear what advice you have for law students who want to pursue their dreams and their passion and do really great things, but not maybe go down that what seems to me like a slippery slope of compromise that leads to some
Yeah.
of these jerk-faced lawyers that we've experienced and maybe are all too prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is there are so many ways to do good with a law degree, and it's not all what you see on TV, the movies. So, I think that the what everybody has in their mind is they're going to be, in the courtroom, they're going to be a litigator, they're going to fight, they're going to, and that's not. If you love, find out what you love and what's drawing you to the practice of law. For me, I've always loved stories and reading and analyzing and helping people. And so for me, that those areas are best served with, it was great when I was teaching, being a law professor was great. Now I'm in-house counsel for a company that does education and public consulting. So that's also a great way to do it. And it's not something that's necessarily, a normal path that you would think of. And so I would say, don't just gravitate directly to, law firm job. Think about what it is that makes you happy and fulfilled, and then think about all the other ways that you can use your law degree to find the right match. And it might not be traditional.
Yeah, that's great. I've been surprised how in the last couple years I've just had a number of conversations with people who have experienced being sued or being involved in lawsuits, and how for pretty much every single one of them it was such a formative time in their life. And it just strikes me that being an attorney for people who are going through years of uncertainty and chaos is really a golden opportunity to have an impact on that person's life and to bring them just a breath of fresh air and pick them up. And yeah, I'm just drawn to conversations and interactions in the midst of adversity when it could be a turning point that truly could change someone's trajectory, and how it seems like the tendency is just to act a little bit too professional and brush off these moments because they can be awkward, instead of digging in and being willing to be a real human being and be vulnerable instead of putting on a false front. But I yeah, I can think of a number of really powerful conversations that we've had,
Hmm.
and a lot of good has come from that. If I'd love for you to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about some of the lessons that you've learned through your many years of fighting monsters, and I'm curious if there are things that you've learned about yourself that are maybe surprising, or just some ways that you've grown and how you've become a slightly different and better person on this side of it.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say being true to yourself and figuring out what your strengths are and what makes you happy and the people that you want to surround yourself with, and making sure that you're being genuine to yourself. So I find that when you're not, so when there's a problem, like when you're kind of going against the stream of what's natural for you, you feel it physically. Like I had anxiety. I had, I was afraid of everything all the time. I was, I didn't sleep well. I had all of these symptoms, physical symptoms that were just coming from not being in the right place and not realizing it. Um, and then as soon as I changed my life and really listened to, you know what, like it's okay. I can get rid of the things that don't make me happy or that stress me out. And I made a whole lot of changes. And so, I changed jobs, I changed careers. I got a divorce, I moved, I remarried. Like all of these changes in my life got me to a point where now I'm like the least stressed out I've ever been. I'm like a totally different person because I'm not going against the stream anymore. I'm not, trying to fit into a life that wasn't right for me. So now that I'm in the right space, I'm in the right career, I'm in the right, home with the right people, I just breathe so much easier. I feel less stressed out. I sleep. I have no health problems. I'm not anxious. I'm not fearful. And you can really feel that that manifests in, how you live each day.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That resonates with me, and I still struggle to accept that something that is stressful and hard can actually affect every area of life, and that was
Yep.
very true for me. I'm about a year and a half out now, a little bit less of nearly a 4-year lawsuit that also overlapped with just some really hard things in my life, and it was a pretty tough struggle for a few years. And at the end of it, I just had all these issues. Like my doctor told me, like physically, he thought it was all just due to stress. And a year later now, I'm just so much healthier. Like you can
Yep.
see it on my face, and
Yep.
all these different things that kind of a confluence of things that have improved. Part of it is working hard on, I think, mental and emotional health, and part of it is talking more honestly with other people and allowing myself to process those things. But also the weight is gone,
Yep.
and it's hard to realize how much something can hold you down, how much a monster on
Yeah.
your back can be weighing you down until it's gone, and then it's
Yeah.
like, wow, what is this? It's like
Yeah,
a whole new
exactly.
life.
It's like you're
Yeah,
so light.
yeah.
Yeah, one of actually the best exercises that I did for myself was that kind of changed my life. I remember being on an airplane, and I don't remember if it was going to a deposition for one of your cases or for another, but I just remember feeling really just conflicted and icky. And so what I did was on the plane, I remember taking out a notebook and listing all the people in my life, over the past 40 years who have made me feel just wonderful, who
Mm.
are genuine and kind and just put in light in the world, and who are just good at their core. And I had this list of people, and when I thought about them, I thought, these are the people I want to surround myself with in life, and this is the kind of person I want to be for other people. And anything else, anything that, the people who are not on this list, who, are surrounding me, gotta go. And
Yeah.
so that, stayed with me, and still. So, not only have I tried to be one of those people, but I've also, really tried to deepen my bonds with the people that were on that list and make sure that I am, telling them how grateful I am for them, and and really surrounding myself with people who are good, just good people, and you're one of them. And really, just having people who are genuine and kind, and not that, everybody's flawed and everybody makes mistakes, but to really recognize the kind of person you want to surround yourself with, and then to do it and to be okay with putting the rest of it out.
Yeah, that's a lesson that you do not get taught in college or really
No.
anywhere else in life. I think
No.
being able to take inventory of our lives, and even, I don't know if budgeting is the right word, but thinking about our relationships and our time, and there are certain interactions we need to have maybe for some good reasons that are challenging and hard. But honestly, the people we surround ourselves with is going to dictate who we
Yes.
become, but
Yes.
also in the moment, just how we experience life and how
Yeah.
happy we are. And I think that that's
Right.
very profound. I like that. I'm gonna gonna steal all your wisdom and share with everyone that I can.
Please.
Yeah. So another question I've been meaning to ask is, through your journey, were there interactions with other people that were especially helpful, or maybe someone tried to help and they did more harm than good? Because I think that we often, I think when we open our eyes, we see that everyone has a monster in their life, and it's all around us, and that we have an opportunity to play some role in another person's story just by helping them and take some of the load off. But we can also pile more on and kind of do more harm than good. So curious if you have thoughts about that.
I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is I remember I was teaching law at a big university, and there was this woman who was on the faculty, and she came into my office, and I was just trying to like make my way in that university. I was new, and she came in and she was really trying to help me, and she was trying to mentor me, and she sat me down and she said, "Listen, I know you are, expressing your ideas in faculty meetings and stuff, but you really need to basically shut up. Like stop trying to say things that you believe in. Stop sharing your ideas because you just haven't earned that privilege yet. You're not senior, you just started, nobody wants to hear it, and you're going to like politically, you're going to put yourself in a bad position. People don't want to hear from you yet because you haven't earned a seat at the table." And I know that she was trying to help me, but I remember she left my office and I just went into the bathroom and cried. And I was like, I gotta leave this job. I was just kind of like, I don't want to be, and I realized I don't want to be surrounded by people who don't want to listen to others because of seniority or politics or gender or, where they came from. I want to be surrounded by people who all want to listen to each other and what they have to bring to the table, and who all want to respect each other and, learn from each other, because we all have something valuable to say. And so that was definitely the first thing that came to mind when you said, somebody trying to help but who didn't. That was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We all have people like that in our lives sometimes. Yeah. Well, I'm curious if you have any questions for me, or since I've been asking you all these very personal things, if you had anything that you want to share that I hadn't touched on, or if you have any questions for me.
Well, I would love to know, I've only been through these lawsuits kind of from my perspective, but I've never sat in that, deposition chair and been grilled like you did. And I gotta say, you were amazing. Like some of the things that you said were just amazing. And, and you really stuck to your conviction even when you were being attacked. And I just, I'm curious from your perspective, in terms of that kind of somebody bullying you and challenging what you fundamentally believe and why you're doing it, and really questioning your entire career and life choices. Somebody you've never met. How did that feel, and how did you keep such composure? Because you really did.
Well, yeah, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. I think I had a little bit too much fun in certain components of the depositions, but honestly, I think that sometimes the only way to get through is to not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
But I was surprised going into it. I had expected that it would be challenging and frustrating, but I completely underestimated the whole experience about how draining it would be and how it just felt mean and dirty sometimes.
Yeah.
Almost like these emotional games that were being played and these accusations. And, I remember one time just basically being lied to point blank because you and I went back and looked up the answer, and the thing I had said was correct, but I was told that it was false. And another time that, the attorney tried, and I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but this didn't seem like a logical argument, but tried to say that everything I had told you was not covered by confidentiality, and it was going to become public. And just all these undermining things and side things, and just the fact that
gaslighting.
Gaslighting, exactly. And just how much anger and emotion there was that was pointed at me really, really caught me off guard. And so I think this is definitely a situation where it forced me to go to places in my own character and my own values that dictated the course forward. And once I found those things, it really helped me to stay on the rails and to see it through, but without having those hard conversations with my wife and with friends, and really having to dig down deep and think about why I was doing what I was doing and not just try to make it go away. I don't think I could have stayed the course. I don't think I could have made it through. And it really didn't feel like a human interaction. It felt like I was seen as,
Right.
just kind of an object. I was thinking earlier about how most of the lawyers that I knew previous to this were more on friendly terms. I used to play a lot of co-ed softball in Washington, D.C., and there are always people on some of the teams who were clearly some kind of high school star who hadn't quite made it, who then is taking it way too seriously. And I took it pretty seriously, and I'm very competitive. But people who just ruin it for everybody else. And that is what I was reminded of by some of these lawyers in the room, just taking it way too seriously in a way that was just very, very harmful to everyone else involved.
Yeah,
just
and
toxic.
so right, because they're like ruining the profession for everybody else. It's like that's why lawyers have a bad name, because of you few.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, yeah, I also think something that helped was, I brought some root beer in with me as, my product, but
great.
It was just having a reminder of something that I love that makes me happy. It's very, very simple, but I think there's something profound about just a reminder, being connected to a good thing that I care about. And I just kept telling myself just to smile when they looked angry, and just to take a moment and pause, and that it, would be okay. But certainly having a rock star lawyer made all the difference in the world to me too. Yeah.
Well, thank you. No, that's great advice. I think the other thing I would love to hear from you is, what would you say to, people just starting on the journey where, they're about to start a legal struggle and it can't be avoided, it's something that they have to be a part of. What are the best ways to prepare for that and to survive through it, knowing what you've been through?
Yeah, there are two things that come to mind immediately. The first is just thinking about the metrics that you use to define success. So I think it's easy to analyze a lawsuit and just want one very specific outcome, often financially. But there are a lot of other elements that I think are really important. And sometimes that one metric that we have can get very cloudy, and at a certain point you just want to make it all go away and you won't necessarily stick to your guns. And so really thinking through thoroughly what the important parts are and what it looks like to win, and how on the other side that you want to have grown and become a better and stronger person, and not just make this uncomfortable thing go away, or not just try to get vengeance. The other thing is to be really intentional about talking to people throughout the entire process. To be honest, with the days that you're frustrated, to recognize it'll be a very long time, and there are all kinds of games that are played, and there's a lot of uncertainty. But just talking to people and leaning on people really makes a difference. And I think one regret I have about my process is I let it steal way too many hours of my life, of my joy, just going down these rabbit trails of thinking through interactions with angry jerk-faced lawyers, or things that I wish I could say to the judge or to the jury to redeem myself and prove that I was right. And there would be so much anger in that. And I wasted hours and hours and hours just stewing over these things and playing them over and over in my mind. And I think if I had discovered this earlier, that there are much healthier outlets for those things, and that you need to get them out. And for me, that was, I did some writing and some poetry and some exercise and just hobbies, and just allowing myself to work through those things instead of churning in my mind over and over and over in these very kind of angry and unhealthy thought patterns. And that was something that I think I've taken with me for sure, and that I would like to help other people with too.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the perfect, summary of like this whole conversation is, when you focus just on vengeance, like you said, and, retribution and regret, then the monsters are winning, right? Because then they're sucking you in. And when you don't let that consume you, when you, turn direction and focus on joy and goodness and moving forward, whatever that means to you, then that's where they don't win. And I think that's where we're both trying to get.
That's right. Very, very well put. Yeah, I think to me, it's helpful to remember that the monsters cannot defeat us if we don't give up. But if we let them control us, that's what a bully does, right? Bullies will try to control you and silence you and make you feel guilty or ashamed, or really just try to keep you from finding your voice and telling your story. And I think if we're able to, at the very least, just be able to continue persisting and to be honest about what the story is, just speaking the truth about what really happened. I think there's extraordinary power, and the monsters cannot win. I think they can beat on us, and that there will be harm, and it will be painful, but I think that unless we let them dominate our thoughts and control our minds, then they just do not have the power. And that's something that is really inspiring to me about these conversations about fight monsters, is understanding that we are stronger than the monsters ever will be if we choose to stick to ourselves and pursue what we believe in.
Yeah. And, people, corporations, they only have the power that we give to them, and we can just say no.
Yeah, that's right. So one last question I want to ask, because I remember that you've dealt with a lot of big corporations, but you also sued a European country, if I'm not mistaken. So your list of foes in the legal realm were a bit bigger than the average person's.
That's true.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, Eve, it was really, really great talking to you. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to getting you back on the podcast sometime soon.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Fight Monsters is a non-profit public advocacy organization that promotes the awareness of bullying in all forms.
To make your mental beat like a drum with a piece of the heart and a piece of the chest, and you can't take no more. I fight against bullying in all forms, all forms, all forms. Fight monsters, fight monsters. You're listening to the Fight Monsters podcast.